One morning, Victoria is outside chatting with her neighbor, Julie. She works at a cozy cafe alongside her co-worker, Selby, who talks about her happy marriage almost every single day. Victoria. Still single, and not because nobody wants her. She just keeps jumping from one date to another, always saying she's still looking for the right one. Right now, she's been flirting with a young executive named Ron, who invited her to his company's fancy party at a hotel a few weeks from now. On the other side of town, a man named Jason had just moved in. He wasn't your typical office worker. He was a builder, now employed by a local church as the director of a charity program that built free homes for families who couldn't afford them. He happened to already know a local resident named Chris, the husband of Selby, Victoria's co-worker, and that's where fate came into play. Victoria saw Jason for the first time. She was immediately attracted to him. She used all the tricks at her disposal. A sweet smile at him, a lingering gaze, light but flirtatious conversation. But Jason? Completely unfazed by Victoria's advances, and that only made Victoria even more attracted to him. Victoria had a crazy idea. If she couldn't approach Jason directly, she would enter his world. She signed up to volunteer for the house construction project. Victoria then told her older sister, Joy, who didn't believe her because she knew her sister was a playgirl. Victoria finally told her older sister the truth. She was attracted to a man named Jason, who was gathering volunteers to build a house. At the first meeting of the volunteers who would be assisting with their work, Victoria suddenly arrived. She immediately lost Jason's focus because she kept staring at him and flirting with him. After the meeting, Victoria tried to flirt with Jason again, but Chris, seeing this, immediately whispered to Jason to be careful with Victoria because she was a playgirl. The next day, as they were about to start work, Chris advised Jason to forget about his ex-fiancée, Rachel. Suddenly, Jason's attention was diverted by Victoria's arrival. Chris immediately told Jason to be careful, as Victoria was a playgirl. Remembering Joy's earlier remarks, Victoria had already purchased some carpentry tools. However, Jason said they weren't suitable for their project. Jason then enlisted the help of a woman named Megan to deliver some supplies to Victoria. Megan then asked a man named Watt to lend her a vest. It turned out that Victoria could read Megan's gestures, indicating that she liked Watt. Megan finally admitted to being honest that she had had a crush on Watt for several years. Knowing that Victoria knew nothing about house building, Megan invited her to nail a window frame, which she thought was the simplest job for beginners. Victoria didn't expect to have to do this job because, from the start, she had only intended to get closer to Jason and had no intention of volunteering. Knowing that Megan was in love with Matt, Victoria deliberately brought up her close relationship with Watt at the time. Megan explained that they were just friends, so Victoria wanted to teach her how to seduce him. In return, Megan had to teach Victoria some carpentry. Besides teaching basic techniques, Victoria also sprayed her perfume on Megan's clothes to make her more confident about approaching Watt. Megan finally worked up the courage to follow Victoria's advice. But to their surprise, Watt was allergic to perfume. This incident made Victoria feel guilty towards Megan. The next day, Victoria told Joy about how difficult it was to build a house and approach Jason. However, Victoria suddenly had an idea. She needed to learn the basics of carpentry so she could have something to talk about to win Jason's heart. After studying extensively online until late at night, Victoria returned to the construction site, this time having already purchased some of the equipment she had previously borrowed from Megan. Coincidentally, Victoria had the opportunity to be alone with Jason, so she immediately started talking about some of the building components she had learned about online the day before. Sometime later, a woman named Elena finally arrived, and her 2 young daughters were going to live in the house. So, the story goes that Elena had just been divorced by her husband. Therefore, she was very grateful to be able to find a new home when she and her 2 young daughters needed help. Seeing Elena's current situation, Victoria remembered that her parents had divorced when she was little, and her mother had struggled alone to raise her and her older sister. Elena then thanked Victoria for helping a complete stranger. While Victoria was on a video call with her sister, she told her about what Elena and her 2 daughters had experienced. This story brought back memories of their childhood. But just as they finished talking, Victoria's house was suddenly hit by a car. Because of this incident, Victoria decided to stay overnight at her sister's house. However, she suddenly saw her two nieces grieving over their father's passing. Victoria learned that her sister was getting a divorce, which made Joy feel deeply regretful for not paying enough attention to her husband. Long story short, a week later, Jason suddenly arrived at Victoria's workplace because she had never been to the construction site. There, Jason expressed his concern for Victoria, leading her to tell him about her sister's divorce and the destruction of her house after being hit by a car. Besides being worried about Victoria, Jason also wanted to share the bad news. Elena would have to move into a new house earlier than planned. Coincidentally, at that moment, Victoria saw 3 of her neighbors arrive, and the next day, she went to the construction site and invited 3 of them to volunteer. Because they were seniors with experience in home building, Jason and Chris were greatly helped, and their construction progress accelerated. Afterward, Victoria invited Jason to see the condition of her house after it was hit by a car. Jason felt that Victoria was still protected by God and saved from the accident. When they entered Victoria's house, Jason told her that he was once engaged to a woman named Rachel, who had left him for another man. Jason eventually decided to move to another city, and coincidentally, he was offered a job at a local church as a director of a charity. When Victoria was about to return to her sister's house, Jason wanted to invite her to a church event that happened to be on Saturday. Of course, Victoria immediately accepted Jason's invitation, but she forgot her promise with Ron to also invite her to a company party on Saturday. Hearing her sister promise 2 men, Joy suggested Victoria go with Jason to a church event. Victoria was confused, as she didn't want to disappoint Ron. However, a few days later, Jason and Ron came to see Victoria, and because they both insisted on keeping their promise on Saturday, Jason finally learned that Victoria already had a boyfriend. Because of this incident, a disappointed Jason asked Victoria what her true purpose in volunteering was. Victoria finally confessed that she had a crush on Jason. Victoria then confessed that she volunteered so she could get closer to him. While at the project site, Jason apologized to Chris for not believing his warnings that Victoria was a playgirl. On the other hand, Victoria finally confessed to Megan that she hadn't been sincere about volunteering because her main goal was to get closer to Jason. While Jason was at the office, his ex-fiancée, Rachel, suddenly came to visit after learning about his whereabouts from her mother. There, Rachel apologized for leaving Jason and asked him to meet her at a hotel because she wanted to talk and try to repair their relationship. After Rachel left, Jason opened up to Chris and asked how he had known that Selby was the right woman for him. Chris then gave Jason some advice, explaining that he and Selby were actually a couple with many flaws. However, despite their shortcomings, they always tried to love and support each other. Long story short, when Saturday finally arrived, Jason decided to refuse Rachel's offer to reconcile. After that, he went alone to a church concert. Meanwhile, Victoria chose to go with Ron, and not long afterward, the 2 of them left in a luxury car to attend a company party at a hotel. At the party, Ron introduced Victoria to his boss. During the event, Victoria began to hear many things Ron said that were very different from the truth. It turned out that all of those lies made Victoria realize the mistakes she had made in the past. Because of that, she eventually decided to leave Ron, explaining that she wanted honesty in her life. Sometime later, Victoria went to the church concert to meet and talk with Jason. At that moment, she hoped that Jason would forgive her for pretending to be a volunteer all this time and for approaching him with hidden intentions. When Victoria arrived inside the building, she immediately began looking around for Jason. However, Jason suddenly felt bored and decided to leave the event instead. Coincidentally, a pastor was looking for someone to share their testimony. After noticing Victoria walking back and forth, he eventually chose her to tell the story of her life. As Victoria walked onto the stage, Jason, who happened to be standing in the church hallway, accidentally saw her. There, Victoria finally shared her story. explaining how she used to approach many different men in her search for the right partner in life. During her testimony, Victoria admitted that she had developed feelings for a man named Jason and had intentionally become a volunteer just to get closer to him. She also confessed how deeply sorry she was for her actions because, while the other volunteers sincerely helped people, she had taken advantage of the opportunity for selfish reasons. After Victoria finished sharing her story, Jason went back into the concert hall to look for her. However, at the same time, Victoria had gone to the restroom. So, while Jason was walking back and forth around the room, he never noticed that Victoria was there. A few moments later, Megan suddenly entered the restroom to look for Victoria and told her that Jason had actually come to the event and had most likely heard her confession. In addition, Megan wanted to thank Victoria because, thanks to her encouragement, she had finally gained the confidence to approach Watt, and it turned out that Watt felt the same way about her. Since her dress was soaked from the rain, Victoria eventually decided to go home, even though Megan had tried to convince her to stay. Not long afterward, Jason asked Megan if she had seen Victoria. Megan immediately told him that Victoria had just gone to the parking lot. Because of the heavy rain and the crowded parking area, Jason had trouble finding Victoria at first. Fortunately, he eventually spotted Victoria's car as it was about to drive past him. Jason then apologized for not trusting Victoria in the beginning. However, after hearing her confession in front of so many people, he finally decided to open his heart to her. A few days later, the volunteers finally gathered together to welcome Elena and her 2 daughters. At that moment, Joy said that she felt proud of her younger sister for being able to help people she did not even know. In the end, Victoria finally chose one man to be her partner. And with that, the movie came to an end. So, that was the story of the movie Home Sweet Home. What do you think about today's discussion? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.